Hi again, everyone. TJ Alt, I-45 now. Welcome to another edition of What You Need to Know, COVID-19. And joining us, as always, is Dr. Philip Keiser, the local health authority for Galveston County, and right now the interim CEO of Coastal Health and Wellness, as well as the Galveston County Health District. So he's balancing a lot as he normally does with things going on. And Dr. Keiser, thanks for coming on. We appreciate you, as we do every week, coming on with us here.
Thank you for having me. Good to be here.
All right, so let me get right into, because this is the question we're going to have probably every single week until they set sail again. And obviously right now the port of Galveston is real hopeful. We saw an article in the Galveston County Daily News today. We had our story last week where there is some hope that we're going to see the first cruises, particularly probably the first in the entire United States, head out of Galveston, maybe Independence Day weekend. You're actively involved in talking with the cruise lines and first looking over their plans before they're submitted to the CDC. Talk about where those are and what do you think of the status right now with those is?
Well, I think so far so good. Carnival has announced that they would like to sail July 3rd, have their first sailing July 3rd. Royal Caribbean is targeting maybe a month later, and they're both working very hard to get that ready. Both cruise lines are working hard to get all their crew members vaccinated. And then one of the other things that the CDC requires is an agreement between the port, the cruise line, and the local health authorities about how things will be handled. And we've got good plans in place. Everybody's happy with them. And it's down to the lawyers arguing over where to put what word and where to put what period. But we expect to be signing off on those things shortly and allow the cruise lines to submit them to the CDC. Now, the one thing nobody knows is one, whether the CDC will accept it. We think they will, because we're basically using their templates and pathways to get to back to cruising. And but we don't know how long that bureaucracy is going to take. So needless to say, everybody's a little nervous, a little anxious right now, but it's moving along very well, I think.
And without giving up too many of the internal discussions you're having there, what you had said right here that Carnival's trying to get in, started again in July. Royal Caribbean seems to be earmarking an August start date. As you look at these plans, are you seeing a dramatic difference in the two of them of how they want to do things, operating like one versus requiring passengers to be vaccinated versus another of trying to just do safety precautions, or are they pretty much on the same par right now?
I think both cruise lines are taking the tactic of trying to get their crews all vaccinated. And that's actually probably the most important thing, because if you have an outbreak on board ship, who's likely to propagate it among a lot of people? Well, it's going to be the crew members, not necessarily the passengers. And also, if you realize that most of these cruises that come out of Galveston are 5 days and 7 days long, there's really not a very long incubation period. So if someone were to come on the ship with COVID, they may expose some people. But by the time those people got sick and were likely to expose other people, then they would actually be getting off the ship. And so the plans really look like what happens when you start to receive passengers. How do you screen them? How do you make sure that they have a negative COVID test? Because everybody's going to have a negative COVID test before they get on board the ship. And then when they come off the ship, how's that going to look? And then in the event that they do actually get a COVID case on board ship, how is that going to be handled? And in most cases, basically, our goal is to get everybody off the ship as quickly as we can, find out who those people are who have likely been exposed to COVID, and work with those individuals. And they'll either go back home or they may have to stay here in Galveston, but work with them to make sure that they're safe, and then pretty much allow everyone else to go about their business.
And one of the things, too, when you talk about the test, is it going to be one of those things that the tests are going to be administered by the cruise lines in some capacity, third party or whatever, or are they going to require a test be done by the passenger, say 2 or 3 days out, and they have to bring proof of that? I mean, what are you seeing right now?
Right. So what we're seeing is they're very actively looking at actually having them done as point of care tests, meaning that you come and you get your test right then and there. And that's probably the best way to do it. But there is leeway to do other things as well. So these things haven't been completely finalized, but it looks like you come in line, you get your test, you screen, you get your test, you show the results of your test, and then you're allowed to get on board the ship.
Gotcha. In fact, we already have a question related to this right now. Is Kathleen Wright that is already asked, said, question, would you, Dr. Keiser, travel on a cruise ship at this time? I already know the answer. You've given it to me, but I'll go ahead and let you answer it again here.
The answer is yes. I think with these safeguards that are in place, and also with the fact that the vaccines are really shaping up to look really good, I'm feeling a lot more confident. And so, I've been vaccinated. My wife's been vaccinated. My whole family's been vaccinated. We vaccinated our kids. And I feel pretty comfortable right now. The only area where I would say I would be a little nervous, and somebody's probably going to shoot me for saying this, would be something like 4th of July in Galveston, and I fully plan on going, but I'll probably wear a mask when I go to that. But that's about where I think things are at this point.
Well, we'll talk about that part as well when we come back here in a little bit. We're with Dr. Philip Keiser. He is the local health authority for Galveston County, talking about COVID-19 issues and beyond. We'll be back with more after this word from Coastal Health and Wellness.
Hi, I'm Christina Garcia. I'm the Patient Services Manager at Coastal Health and Wellness. I want all Galveston County residents to know that the open enrollment for the healthcare insurance marketplace is now. At Coastal Health and Wellness, we understand the importance of having access to high quality health care. And we understand that the application process can sometimes be stressful, trying to figure out which plan is best for you and your family. So we have certified application counselors that are waiting to walk you through the process. There are 4 categories of plans to choose from, and our counselors will help you through the process. All the plans will cover essential health benefits, pre-existing conditions, as well as preventive care. So what do you need to know, Galveston County residents? The time to act is now. If you need assistance or if you have questions, call us. At Coastal Health and Wellness, we're here to help you.
And again, Coastal Health and Wellness has open enrollment for healthcare going on till August 15th. It's been extended, and I know a few folks we've sent that way from there. If you just joined us, Dr. Philip Keiser, the local health authority for Galveston County, as well as the interim CEO of Coastal Health and Wellness, as well as the Galveston County Health District, is on with us as he does most every week. Coming in. If you've got questions, you go ahead and post those in the comment section. We'll take them in there. Now, because we talked about this last week about the variants, and particularly the Indian variant. Last week when we spoke, there were 2 confirmed cases of the Indian variant in Galveston County. I want to know if those numbers have changed any. And then also, too, Pfizer announced this morning that it's a vaccine based on the test they've done is effective against that variant. Can you give us an update on all of that right now?
Yeah, sure. So last week we reported, actually we found it the week before, there were 2 cases of people with the Indian variant. One, they were related. One of them was sick and in the hospital. The other one was at home. But both of them are doing well at this point. And there was a lot of question of, does the vaccine protect against it? And so the British actually released a very large study of thousands of people that they had studied in Great Britain. And what they found was that people that are fully vaccinated against COVID-19 using the Pfizer vaccine, 88% of them were fully protected against having any type of serious infection. That compares to about 90 to 95% against some of the other variants. And while that number seems a little bit lower, it's in what we call the margin of error. When we have polls for president, you can say that someone's ahead by a couple points or so, but it's within the margin of error. So all in all, it's looking pretty good. We don't have additional cases yet, but keep in mind that our surveillance system usually runs a week or 2 behind, because we take random samples of the people that have had positive tests, and then we run them to see whether they have any of those variants.
There was some talk about, I've heard it called different things: the Southeast Texas variant, the Bryan College Station variant, the Aggie variant. Yeah. And the like. Someone tried to call it a Galveston variant. You said you wouldn't be surprised if a Galveston variant comes along.
Sure.
What's the status of that right now? Is there a different variant out there that's kind of more Texas exclusive?
No, not really. I mean, still, the one we're seeing the most of is actually the what we call the UK variant, and that one we know is a little more infectious. And so it's not surprising that we're seeing that as the dominant variant at this point. What's interesting about that, despite the fact that that's become the dominant variant, we haven't seen our numbers of cases go up. In fact, we still continue to see them go down, albeit at a very slow pace over this past month. So what that tells me is that even though the UK variant is more infectious, the vaccine is working very well at keeping it in check.
And so that people can understand what is a variant, because I know we asked this question last week, but I want to go back to this as often as because I think some people may get this feeling. They'll watch a Hollywood movie and they see a virus morph, and that variant becomes the most deadliest thing than it ever was, and it fights off everything. Can you explain what a variant is and where there are concerns and where we should not be concerned when it comes to that?
Well, so the Hollywood depiction of the virus morphing is right on. These viruses do morph. They morph all the time. But just imagine, sometimes they morph in ways like if it were a person, they would have no legs, or they would be blind. And these variants are things that are not successful and they die off. And every now and then there's a mutation that occurs that makes it a little better. And so what we see over time is that we see all these little different mutations occurring, and we can detect that in the samples that we get, because we actually can measure the viral DNA and look at differences in that genetic material every time we see each individual virus. And they follow certain patterns. And the reason why they follow certain patterns is because certain mutations give it a little bit of an advantage. Like some of them make it a little more infectious. Some make it a little more toxic, and then it makes people sicker. But keep in mind, it doesn't, from the virus's point of view, being really toxic is not good for the virus, because those people die and then it can't spread. And so often what we see over time with these types of infections is that the infection becomes more widespread, but not necessarily as bad. Now, I'm not saying that's what's happened with COVID yet, but it's normal to see these variations, and it's normal to see slight differences between them. It's very, very, very unusual to see something that causes a dramatic difference that makes the virus that much more deadly, because, again, that is, one, hard to do, and two, in the long run, it doesn't really give an advantage to the virus.
I'd like to encourage folks to go ahead and submit your questions. We already have several in the queue. We'll be getting to your questions as soon as we can. Particularly, we have some really interesting stuff from Stan Van Horn. He has a great question. We'll get to that in just a little bit, Stan, to go with. We've heard in the news here the last couple of days, heart issues, particularly among younger males coming in. Not sure connected to the vaccine. That's what's being looked at. From what you've seen so far, is there a connection, or is this something that may be just exacerbated, or because we're paying more attention for things that's being looked at a lot closer?
Yeah, the answer is we don't know at this point, right? And we went through this, say, with the J&J vaccine, where women were having clots, and it was found out that, well, there really was an association with the vaccine, but it happened very, very rarely. The problem is anytime you look at something that happens very commonly and then cross it with something that happens rarely, you can sometimes find an association. So obviously, within the past couple of weeks, we've been vaccinating more kids who are, from ages 12 and up. And with that, there have been cases of myocarditis. Now, what myocarditis is, it's basically an inflammation of the heart muscle. Just like you would get a strained muscle from either a viral infection or working out too much or injuring it. That's what's happening with the heart. There's inflammation in the muscle itself. Now, when that happens, it can cause long-term damage to the heart, can cause short-term damage to the heart. But remember, with teenage boys, they don't have very many problems at all. And so one of the things that actually does happen with them is that they get myocarditis, and it's usually due to a viral infection. It's a very rare type of thing, but we see it, and we see a few cases every year. So now imagine that you have something where you see a few cases in a community every year, and you're vaccinating a whole bunch of teenage boys. Well, now you see vaccine, you see cases of this happening, and we don't know if it's what we call causal. We don't know whether the vaccine actually caused it or whether it was just bad luck that the kid happened to get vaccinated right before he developed this illness. But time will tell. They're going to study it, and we'll know in probably several weeks or so whether this is a real phenomenon.
And now too, we're taking a look at the latest stats on vaccinations, particularly. 34% of eligible Texans. This is last week's data. We haven't gotten the updated data yet. Have been fully vaccinated against COVID-19. Galveston County, the fully vaccinated is about 40% there, and 60% of at least received one half of the 2 shots that would need it if it's Moderna or Pfizer. Johnson & Johnson has not been that prominent as far as vaccines are concerned in Galveston County. So mainly it's been Pfizer and Moderna. You said that wasn't unexpected, and really what we're seeing some different numbers as far as how many people are coming out to be vaccinated right now. Talk about that, if you would.
Yeah, so when we first started looking at vaccinating people, one of the big questions we had was, will people accept the vaccine? So we did a series of polls, and we polled UTMB employees. We did a poll through the health department, and did some informal polling in the general population. And what we found was that about 52% of the people out there really wanted the vaccine. They wanted it really bad. And you saw what happened when we got the vaccine in the early part of this year. It was a mad rush. We had to have waiting lists. We had to have criteria for giving people priority to the vaccine. We had to have a mass drive-through, and we still didn't have enough vaccine to meet all the demand. Once we got about 50%, the demand fell off very dramatically. In fact, it was shocking. I thought we would have sort of like just a gradual decline. But what really happened was it went like this, and it fell off very, very rapidly. So, at the height at Walter Hall Park, we were doing almost 5,000 vaccines a day, and all over the county, we were doing well over 5,000 vaccines a day. And now, it'd be lucky if we did about 2,000 vaccines last week. So the demand has really dropped. People who really want it seem to have gotten it. There are still people out there that are thinking about it and wanting to get it, and so we're trying to make provision to them to get it. But there's a significant number of people who really don't want it at this point.
Let's go ahead now and get to our viewers' questions. And I told you we had a really good one from Stan Van Horn. This is intriguing. In fact, he's been waiting to ask you this question. It's rather long here, so I'm after. I don't know how close you can see it on your screen there. Keiser says, so Stan asked a regular viewer of ours. He said, I was vaccinated in January, had a blood donation in March, and tested negative for antibodies. Donated blood again on 5/15, and now I have antibodies. Did I have COVID and didn't know it, or did the antibodies take 5 months to show up? I'm assuming he's saying from his vaccine. It was the same antibody test ran each time. I had 0 COVID symptoms, and my wife showed negative for antibodies the same day, and she was vaccinated in February. And the reason he's asking this, by the way, is if he has antibodies that can help people, he'd like to donate plasma. If he can in people. So this has been one of those things where I know I've heard this question a lot. It says, okay, I've been vaccinated. Do I get antibodies now? And now can I go and give my blood to go help other people?
Yeah.
And normally in that, so without obviously you testing him and everything else, just based on that criteria, what's likely to happen there?
It's a tough question.
We appreciate you.
Yeah, no, this is a tough question, and a lot of it has to do with about timing of when the antibodies were measured, also about what test that was being used to measure those antibodies. So, if you remember very early on when we started doing testing, first we got the PCR test, the swabs, and a lot of people didn't like getting that. So what we did was we also started offering people antibody testing. And what we found was there's a lot of antibody tests out there, and some work better than others, and none of them worked as well as the swab. And that's why we went away from using antibody testing as a way of measuring whether people had COVID. So the antibodies that are measured through commercial tests it does not measure the types of antibodies that give you immunity. So it's actually possible that you could have antibodies and not be immune, and possible that you not have antibodies and be immune. And so without knowing the exact test that was being used when you give blood, it's hard to know. I would suspect that most blood banks, when they do these types of testing, because they do so much, they basically use something that they use types of tests that are that don't have a lot of specificity. They have a lot of sensitivity, and the reason that's done is that if there's any chance that there's infection in the blood, they throw it out. Okay, so that's the first issue right there. Now the second issue is so in answer to your question, I don't know. I don't know how to interpret those antibody tests, but knowing what we know from clinical trials, people that got vaccinated in January are not getting COVID at a very high rate at all. In fact, in our hands, in our county, it's less than 0.5%. And when they get it, they're not very sick, and they don't transmit it to other people. Now, the second part of that test is, will my antibodies help other people? So there were a lot of studies done fairly early on looking at antibodies from people to see if that could help prevent COVID. And quite frankly, they haven't panned out all that well. There have been some cases where some studies where they had a little bit of benefit and some are not. But what seems to work better are these what are called monoclonal antibodies, synthetic antibodies that are made in the lab in a test tube and given together as a cocktail. So there's multiple types of antibodies against different part of the COVID virus. And that's what we're using now as a commercial product. So we don't have anything where you can donate blood for studies for antibodies. But Baylor may still have something. They had something early. I don't know if it's still up and running.
And a question somewhat related to that. There's Dolores Howard asked, she says, active chemo patient relative took vaccine, but antibody test shows no antibodies. What can they do now? And again, this goes to what you just said. It doesn't necessarily, just because you've had the vaccine doesn't mean you're going to show up with antibodies. And that's right, because of that inconsistency you just explained, right? Right.
And also keep in mind that these vaccines don't work just by making antibodies. Basically, there's a type of cell called a T cell, which then takes the vaccine, processes it, presents it in a way so that you make antibodies against it. So it's likely that we have other means of immunity in our body other than just the antibodies. And the antibodies are the thing that we can measure, so that's what we measure.
Another question from a viewer, Brianna Eddie, has asked, can vaccinated people carry the virus that could infect others? This is something that I think...
Right. So one of the big considerations in the CDC lifting their masking requirement was that not only do people who are vaccinated not get COVID, but they're very, very, very unlikely to transmit it to someone else. There's not enough virus in the nose when you get COVID after you've been vaccinated to transfer it to someone else. So that's really good news, right? And so that can make you feel a lot better about that. And if you have elderly parents or grandparents and you're concerned about it, don't worry about it. But if you're still worried, just wear a mask and it'll be okay.
And talking about wearing masks, you brought this up right beforehand when July 4th comes around, that you're going to go out and celebrate Independence Day. We're going to have the fireworks back and the light. But then it comes down to face coverings or masks. Should we wear them? And I'll tell some folks a little inside story. You and I always chat before we come on the air. We're just talking about general stuff. And we both talked about how we've gone into places here in the last week or so since the CDC recommendations changed where we didn't go in with a face covering. And like I said, I keep mine handy just in case the business wants their customers to have a face covering on. I will put it on because I respect what the business owner wants to do. I'm fine with that. But even you have gone in and said, somebody recognized you and gave you daggers because you went in.
Right? And it wasn't done personally. I just forgot it, and I was in a subway, and somebody looked in and they saw me and started giving me dirty looks. But if you look back at what the CDC recommendations are for masking, they say in most situations, right? And the situations where they say you should continue to wear masks are things like, when you're flying, in healthcare situations, and in areas where, so like a homeless shelter or in a nursing home. Those are all areas where we should still be wearing masks. But the other area they said you should really strongly consider wearing masks is where there's crowds of people. Okay, so you think about what happens on July 4th. My wife and I like to go down to watch the fireworks. We usually go down by about 39th Street where Guido's is because that's really close. And let me tell you, everybody's elbow to elbow there. And that's exactly the situation that CDC has said, be careful about. So does that mean don't go? No, you're vaccinated. You're probably going to be okay. You want to make sure, wear a mask. And that's all I'm saying. And I personally plan on going, but I'll probably be wearing a mask when I do.
On that, but let me ask this because it's somewhat related in some ways. Is since it's the Great American Pastime, the Houston Astros announced over the weekend their increased capacity for Minute Maid Park. We saw at Madison Square Garden over the weekend, 15,000 fans there for a basketball playoff game, and no one, I mean, very few people were wearing a mask there.
Right.
And by the way, don't take this wrong, folks. It's not a tone. I mean, it is. We're going to have to get back to this point anyway. But are those, I mean, and obviously anything that may come from that, we're not going to hear for a while. But in those situations, if we say go to a ball game, should we go ahead and have a face covering on just in case? Or again, the mask is more to protect the person next to me that may be around me than it is the other way around to protect me. But, should we be masking up when we go to a baseball game or something like that?
I think, in terms of how much does a mask protect a vaccinated person, we really don't know the answer to that. We know that it provides some protection. As you said, when no one had a vaccine, it is to protect other people as well, so that you don't cough on them. But even if it reduces your risks a few percentage points, particularly if you're at high risk, if you get COVID, even though you've been vaccinated, it might not be a bad thing to do. And I think that's all anyone is saying. Nobody's trying to force anyone to wear masks at this point. We all recognize that the numbers are gone down like this. Now they've kind of flattened out and they're still decreasing. So we think we're getting near the end game of this. And as we open up more, we'll know how close we are. And that's just the way it is right now.
Speaking of vaccines, I want to show a little bit here from something that happened just today, just right before we came on the air. This is Dr. Ben Raymer, obviously the interim president of UTMB Health. He had a little special surprise thing for 10 of the scientists and researchers who worked on the COVID-19 vaccine trials here at UTMB Health. And should point out, UTMB Health, one of the rare institutions that got to test out both Pfizer and Moderna because of the distance between the main campuses in Galveston and League City. So pretty cool event. It was a surprise for all of them. Can you just talk about the work that's been done by your colleagues at UTMB?
Oh, yeah.
Folks, Dr. Keiser, yes, we talk about the local health authority. He works for UTMB. And he's an infectious disease expert and still teaches and everything else. But can you just talk about the work of your colleagues who you get to around them on a regular basis on talking about these things?
Yeah, no, it's been remarkable. I mean, what's been accomplished here. People don't realize how lucky we are to have this institution here. When I think probably the first thing that happened was we were able to do testing. And part of the reason why we were able to do testing is that we had scientists that were studying the coronaviruses before we knew that they were going to do this, because SARS-1 was a coronavirus and MERS is a coronavirus. And so they were able to actually, as soon as the sequences were published, to make their own coronaviruses in the test tube. This allowed us to really get ahead of the game. So it allowed us to make tests available. And if you remember when nobody could get any tests, come in March, we were starting to be able to do our own testing. And by April, we were able to stand up very large testing centers, in large part because of the work that they did. But then the other thing that they did was they were able to take those synthetic viruses that they made and test the antibodies that were being generated by these various vaccines. So, some of this data about what we know about Pfizer, about how effective it is in terms of its immune response, actually happened right here, just right down the street from everyone. And that continues to go on. And now that we're actually looking at variants, it's the same guys. We provide the samples. As the health authority, one of the things that I try to do is I go, okay, can you do this for me? And they turn around and they go, yes. I can't imagine what it's like in a place where you don't have that kind of support. And so it's been nothing short of amazing, very gratifying, and it's worked out very well for all of us.
Yeah, not every local health authority can call up his coworkers and say, "Hey, by the way, I need this for COVID," and get it. And that's been benefits here about it. So it was pretty neat. And we're going to have a story up a little bit later. It was as I said, it was a surprise event for these 10 researchers and scientists, and it goes down to, and if those of you who missed it when we had the coverage of the cruise ship stuff, and Dr. Raymer got up there and he's pointing out there are a lot of folks from out of town, Florida particularly, that were here, and he pointed to just down the block. You see those stats, and he was referring to the national lab. He says that's where this stuff is found out. That's where we fix it, and it was interesting, just in the backyard. So it was kind of fun to watch that there today. Speaking of what we know,
I just got to say this, and you mentioned Dr. Raymer, and I think one of the reasons that we were able to do this is the tone that he set for all of us, and that this is something we had to do. We had to work on this, and he wanted us to work together. And it's just very good leadership that has just trickled down all throughout the whole system, and I think we've all benefited from it.
Yeah, and Ben's been very open too, I should point out, with everything that's been going on here. He's not in what's been going on. I think we found for example, you haven't either. You and I have been essentially doing these every week for a year. We've taken some breaks along the way, but with everything going on, it's been, I think there's no one can short the health district or UTMB Health for making sure folks have got information. Speaking of what we know about COVID right now, and this is a question that's come up early on, and this is Mike Linton asking, have we learned yet is why children seem to be less susceptible to COVID?
No, I wish we knew. It turns out, actually, that's a blessing, right? We were worried that this was going to be like flu or like SARS, where it affected both the very young and the very old. And it only affected the very old. And so the very young have minimal symptoms. However, we are finding out now that kids are having issues with concentrating, and so parts of what we call long COVID. And then there's this inflammatory syndrome, which we were all really worried about, which has turned out to be very rare, that occurs in children. But we really don't understand why kids just seem to get it, shrug it off, and keep on going. It's it's something about the virus and the age of the immune system that seems to make a difference.
And again, like you say, if it'd been other other viruses, we would have been, and we were early on, extremely concerned about children with this, and because that's been kind of the hallmark from polio on, that the kids and the elderly are the ones who are hit hardest by this, and it's been, and I'm sure it's going to be researched for the longest time. What brought out as we researched kind of some of the long haulers, I'd see in the room I'm at, by the way, as I said, I'm on the UTMB Captain's over the Rebecca Seeley building right now, where we're at for an event, and I see Jeff Temple's name here. We have talked about this before, what I call the long haulers program that's going to be going. Where does that sit right now of how active that is, so we can start understanding the long-term effects on?
So there's a clinic, a post-COVID clinic that everyone from the hospital gets referred to. Other people can get into it as well. It's run by pulmonologists, but they also have psychologists, get a whole battery of tests coming out. And really what's going on now is just trying to define what is it, that thing that we call long hauling. And it primarily is some people having persistent difficulty with shortness of breath. You can, that makes sense, because you get the virus in your lungs and it can cause damage to lungs. But we're seeing people who have difficulty concentrating, and fatigue are the main things that are coming up. And I think we can expect to start seeing some publications about that, as well as then, once it's better defined, looking at various interventions to see if there are things that can make a difference.
Dr. Philip Keiser, the local health authority, has been on with us from local health authority for Galveston County, has been on with us as he does each week. And thanks again and for everyone who asked their questions today, and got a lot of questions answered for folks. Obviously, I think the cruise ship question is going to be one we're going to have over and over and over again. And you and I had already talked about this. You're ready. to talk about it as any teams. I do find it's fascinating for that. And I should point out, someone asked you, they didn't ask me. I'm going. I'm scheduled, if we can, get out July 15th. I have a wedding to go to on July 3rd, so I'm not going out then. It's nothing to do with anything other than the wedding. I thought about skipping the wedding, but then I decided no, we're going to go ahead and do the wedding. But just wanted to make sure that that folks know that, and if you don't see me or Dr. Keiser on with masks out there, we're following the recommendations. We will wear them when we need to, but not to. And hopefully we'll get these back to a regular portion. This programming note too. Last Wednesday we were to have our monthly series with UTMB Healthcare Unmasked. That's now been moved to Wednesday at noon. We're going to be talking. This is Stroke Awareness Month, and here in May. And although it's wrapping up this weekend, we still want to get to that. And that's another thing that does bring into something I think COVID is having a little bit longer effect on. We are starting to see, Dr. Keiser, folks have what would normally be some acute symptoms of things become chronic because they're not getting those regular checkups from the doctor. And you get this multiple times. We need folks to start going back to their medical care. I know some folks care, but there are some long-term effects that are going to be non-COVID related directly as far as the virus, because folks have been limited in their health care, that they may find themselves in some health issues. I want to give you a chance to talk about that.
Yeah, no, so that I mean, definitely we've been seeing that, and we've seen it over the past year where people weren't able to go see their doctor, and we're not following up with things. And we've do what's called an excess death analysis. And so what this means is that we look back, say, at the 5 years before COVID, and we calculate how many deaths per 100,000 people in the county that there were each month, and then we go look at COVID, and then we see there's a lot more. And in addition, not all of them are directly related to COVID. So our conclusion is that there is, in addition to COVID, there's some of those people may be dying from COVID that we weren't aware of, but it's also the effect of not being able to see your doctor or go into, or just people are afraid to go in and see their doctor. And so we want to get the message out there, that the clinics are open, that the hospital's open, that operations are getting done. People are worried, well, I'll put this off because, I just want to wait. Well, it's time to stop putting it off. I went to see my doctor today, and I had been putting off getting my Shingrix vaccine. And my last excuse was, well, I'm getting my COVID vaccine. I don't want to get the Shingrix vaccine at the same time. But today the jig was up, and I just said, okay, fine, let's do it. So, it really is time to start looking at life beyond COVID and start taking care of ourselves in the way that we need to.
Yeah. I jokingly, as you talked about, going in for your Shingrix, with the shingles vaccine, easier way to say it. But I was in that same boat. I'd gotten Pfizer done, and I tried to sneak in my shingles vaccine, and they said, no, we want you to wait. That's like, oh, no. Because as much as I didn't like COVID when I had it, I sure didn't want to get shingles. That's like a double win.
Well, you see, I was just the opposite. I didn't like the way the COVID vaccine made me feel, particularly after the second one. And now I'm thinking, oh God, I got to get another vaccine. I'm going to be sick, for tomorrow. So.
Well, and we had talked about that, that it had some effects. A question just popped in for you. I just want to ask this about: are there any pediatricians who had the vaccine? I want to get my grandson, who won't be 12 until the end of July, but want to get it earlier to have him ready for it. Right now, we should point out that unless it's 12 and older, the eligibility doesn't start till then. So this is from Casey Guyton. And so, Casey, I think you're going to have to wait until July. I know you're looking out for your grandson. That's important, but it really needs to be waited till July, correct?
Yeah. But the good news is that we are actually looking at getting the vaccine out in pediatric offices. So the FDA just told us that the Pfizer vaccine, which is the only one that's good for kids, can stay in the refrigerator for up to 30 days. So that changes our whole strategy and how we've been using that vaccine. We don't need to thaw it and then use it right away. We can actually have it sitting on the shelves without being in very, very cold storage for up to a month. And we're already starting to push it out into some of the UTMB vaccine centers. We're talking to a pediatrician. And as we kind of work out the nitty gritty of the details, you're going to find that this vaccine is going to be available. So the day he turns 12, you should be able to take him to his pediatrician and get it. If you can't, you can bring him up to one of the UTMB clinics and get it.
I'm glad you brought that up, and I'm sorry to throw this in at the last minute when we were trying to wrap up. But yeah, that I found that fascinating. That Pfizer has been really studying this to say, okay, once it's thawed out, keep it in a regular fridge until for that 30 days. That is a game changer. Whereas before, it was that you've talked about several times, the extra cold storage that has to happen on this most of the time.
Yeah, no,
I find that interesting.
Yeah, no, that's a big deal. I mean, because before, look at what we did. You know, every day at Walter Hall Park, when we would vaccinate 3,000 people or 4,000 people, we would take those doses out of cold storage into a portable cold storage unit, and we would take them out one vial at a time, thaw them, dilute them, and then give them, and constantly be doing that throughout the day, so that we ended up with the right number and we didn't waste any. And now the situation will be is, well, okay, we'll take it out of the ultra cold storage, we'll put it in the regular refrigerator. Oh, we got 5 kids who need to get vaccinated today. Fine, we'll thaw a vial, we'll vaccinate those 5 kids. And because we have enough of it, the state has also told us don't worry about wastage like we used to. I mean, it used to be if you had 1 dose wasted, it was huge. I mean, we'd have to account for everything. Now, no big deal. But that being said, you know, we gave about 2,000 doses last week and we wasted 3. So we're still doing a good job at being good stewards.
Good. Dr. Philip Keiser, our local health authority, has been on with us. Again, a reminder to you, coming up Wednesday, folks. I know it says a different date on there, but this is rescheduled from last week. That we're going to have Dr. Peter Kahn. All of this is going to be another visit with him, and he's in the Department of Neurosurgery at UTMB. We're going to be talking about stroke, learn the causes and effects of stroke, and we should have on with us too a stroke patient who was treated at UTMB as well. Know the signs and the like. This is Stroke Awareness Month in April, so that's coming up Wednesday at noon. We had postponed last week. The weather was pretty nasty too, so we're trying to focus on that as well. So we moved that to this Wednesday at noon. So make sure you join us for that. Philip, thanks for coming on with us again. We, as always, appreciate your time, and we appreciate our viewers for coming in and adding their input as well. Thanks for everyone for watching. We'll be back next week. I think your schedules, we're back to the normal, hopefully 1 o'clock time next week. It's folks have gotten used to it when we bounce on around the time like we did today. So we appreciate it. Thanks everyone for watching. I'm TJ Alts, I-45.